Hello chums, and welcome to Setups for Simpletons. I've created an entire series dedicated to explaining Gran Turismo 7's quirky and sometimes unforgiving tuning system, but sometimes it's nice to just copy someone else's homework and be done with it. So in this series I will take one car at a time, show a complete setup, and a lap of the Nürburgring for good measure. Disclaimer, if you use my setup it does not mean you're a simpleton. Let's begin! I'll bet some of you wanted to forget this engine swap even existed. The Escudo swap has plenty of detractors, thanks to the GTO being fairly heavy and for having only 5 gears with which to manage the obscene turbo lag. The thing is, I love this combo, so I wanted to give it another try. For the visuals, the car has the wide body fitted, along with aftermarket wheels which are a few sizes larger than standard. Increasing the size can slightly improve agility. Decreasing the size will make the car more stable over the curves. There's a front splitter for front downforce, a rear diffuser for front and rear downforce, and a rear wing to keep it all stable. This is a fully upgraded setup, so the car has every upgrade available, including power, handling, weight, and the body rigidity increase. The GTO is a generally stable car, until you give it 1200 horsepower, at which point it can become quite challenging. Front body height has to be raised, as this car is prone to wheel arch rubbing on the Nordschleifer. It's also fairly unstable when braking, so initial torque at the front is higher than the rear, which can add some stability. Set it too high and the car becomes difficult to turn. Obviously the biggest part of this setup is the gear ratios. I've completely sacrificed this car's ability to launch in favour of making first gear usable on low speed corners. What this basically means is that the car will have no power whatsoever even in first gear until roughly 50 miles per hour. This allowed me to stretch the rest of the gears slightly further, though the GTO still tops out before its real top speed, but this is pretty much the best compromise I could figure out for this particular track. The Escudo GTO is one of my favourite engine swaps because it reminds me of Gran Turismo 1. In that original game from 1997, there were several Halo cars from the Japanese manufacturers, such as the NSX, R32, R33, RX-7, Supra, 300ZX, and this. The Skylines, Supras, and these GTOs were all capable of being upgraded to over 900 horsepower, making them the fastest cars in the game, and the driving experience was challenging thanks to the very peaky power delivery. This is much the same, so I like it. It's a very different proposition to most cars because a lot of your mental bandwidth is spent trying to keep this car in the correct gear. Shift times are more important here than in pretty much any other car in the game, so if you're a cretinous halfwit like me, it can distract you from actually driving the car. It's also slightly unstable when braking, which can cause issues such as crashing and death. Not selling it so far, am I? The upshot is that this car is insanely fast. Its top speed is limited to roughly 240 miles per hour by the gearing, but it gets to that speed rather quickly. It also has very little understeer for a front-heavy all-wheel drive, so it will fire itself out of corners in ways that doesn't seem possible. Since this engine is also lighter than the original V6 or the Demon engine, the brakes are actually much better than you might expect, being more than up to the task of slowing the GTO down. This engine swap can be a royal pain, but once you get it right, I'd say it's one of the most rewarding cars in Gran Turismo 7. In the end, I managed a 6 minutes 4 seconds, which is 5 seconds ahead of my previous attempt. It's also now level with the Demon swap for the same car, which has more torque and a much wider spread of power. So, that was my second attempt at the Escudo GTO. The Escudo GTO! I hope it helped. Thank you very much for watching. Please do like, subscribe and kick my bell so that you get notified of future uploads. Take care of yourself, and ta-ra.